Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome back to part 6 of the Strapi Crash Course Tutorial 2025 edition. In the previous video, we took a look how to represent our data in Strapi for our banner, our header, and our footer here. But today, we're going to take a look at building out our landing page, which is going to be this main page that's going to have a hero section, our section header, have these cards in a row like so, have text with image, and so on. But for this video to get started, we're literally going to take a look at this hero section and how to think about the content and the data. The way we want to think about this in Strapi, we're going to have a single collection type, which is going to be a landing page with basic title and description. But then we're going to have a section called blocks that's going to represent all the different blocks. And one of the blocks is going to be this hero section. So what we're going to do, we're going to make a hero section component that's going to have the following elements. It's going to have our heading, our text, our links, 1 and 2, for which we'll be able to use a previous component, and then we're going to have an image. So let's jump back into our Strapi application, and we're going to take a look at our content type builder. And currently, from the previous lessons, we built our global page to represent our banner, our header and footer data. We created some basic components here. So now we're going to go ahead and create a new single type just to practice. In the future, I'll show you how to make dynamic pages, but today, let's start by creating a new single type, and we're going to call it landing page. Very original. Click continue, and we're going to start with text field. We're going to use short text, and we're going to call this title. Let's add another field. Again, select the text. We're going to make it long text, and we're going to say this is a description. Now let's click finish, and we're going to save. Now that we have this, we could go ahead to our content manager, and notice we have our landing page. Let's click our landing page, and we could give it a title, landing page, and description. This is going to be our main page that folks will land on, hence landing page. We're going to click publish. And if we want to expose this page to our API, we're going to go into settings. Under users permission, we're going to go into roles. We're going to click public. And similar like we exposed our global page, we're going to go ahead and expose our landing page. We're going to select find. And now if we make a GET request to API/landing page, we're going to get the data. But first, make sure that you save. So now in Postman, instead of making a call to our global page like we did in the past, we're going to say landing page and click send. So notice we are getting our data from the landing page because we see here our title and we see our description. But now we want to make sure that we add a way to represent our different sections on our landing page. If we are looking at our website, we have a couple of different sections. We have the hero section, we have our heading, and so on. I did mention that we're going to start with the hero section. So let's go ahead and create one so then we could introduce a new concept in Strapi called dynamic zone. And just to quickly recap, we're going to create a new component that we're going to call hero section that's going to represent this heading, this text, our links, and this image. So let's jump into Strapi and do that. So here in Strapi, we're going to navigate to our content type builder, and we're going to click on create a new component. We're going to start by creating a new category called blocks. This is where all of our sections are going to live. And we're going to call this our hero. and click Continue. Taking a look at our design, we have our heading, our text, and our links, and our image. So let's start by creating our fields to represent this data. For heading, we're going to select text, keep it short text, and we're going to say this is a heading. Let's add another field. For our text, we're going to pick Markdown. I really like Markdown. I enjoy writing it, and it makes it easier to add content. And we're going to call this text. Now let's add another field. So taking a look at our layout, we created our heading, our text. So now let's create these links. So for our links, we're going to reuse our link component. So we're going to click Component, click Use Existing Component, and let's select Component. We're going to select our link component, and we're going to call this links because you're going to have multiple, and it's going to be a repeatable component. And let's finally add another field, and this is going to be our media. We're going to call it image. It's going to be single media. And if you go to advanced, you could specify that you only want images. Back to basic settings, click Finish. Now that we have our component, consists of our heading, our text, our links, and our image. And this data structure represents this component here. So now let's save it. In Strapi, we have this concept of dynamic zone. What dynamic zones do, allow your user to pick and choose out of a group of components you created to structure their content. For instance, your dynamic zone could have the hero section, the heading section, the card section, and so on. And I'll show you an example of the completed project, what that looks like, but let's just quickly jump in and create one. So now let's navigate back to our landing page, and we're going to add another field. And this is going to be our dynamic zone. Let's click on it, and we're going to call it blocks. Now let's add our first component to the zone. Click on Use Existing Component. Go to our blocks, and we're going to add our hero section that we have here. Then go ahead and click Finish and Save. Notice now we have our landing page with our dynamic blocks with this hero. So let's take a look at what it looks like in our Content Manager. When we go to the Content Manager and we take a look here and we click on the landing page, notice that we have our title and description, but now we have this Add Component block, and we're able to add our data. So I'm going to go ahead and recreate the data that I have on my previous landing page. I want to say build and launch without problems. That's going to be our heading. For our text, I'm going to put this lorem ipsum. If we scroll down, notice now we have our links component. We're going to create two links. So looking at this mockup, and you could put whatever text you like. I'm going to say get started for the label. And this is going to go to just the HTTPS strapi.io website. External true is button link true. And we're going to say it's primary because in our UI, this is a primary green color. So we want to tell our front end eventually when we build it that this should be a primary button. Now we're going to create another one. And for this one, we're going to say how it works. And for this, I'm going to redirect to our Strapi documentation. This is an external link, so we're going to say true is button link true, and we're going to say styling secondary. And again, this is the information we're going to use to tell our front end how we want to style these buttons. And finally, we're going to add our image. I'm going to go into our assets folder. I'm going to add new asset, You could add whatever image you want, but I have this image that I used in my mockup, which is tables. Click open, upload, finish. And now that I have my data, I'm going to click publish. And here we have our basic landing page with one hero block. In the future lectures, we're going to build out the rest of the blocks, but I just want to show the pattern, which is going to basically repeat for each one of these blocks as we continue to build them. We're basically going to create the component to represent the block and add it to this landing page. Now that we have this, let's go back to our Postman instance. And when I click send, we know that we're only going to get our top level fields. Our dynamic zones, they are relationship fields. And so we need to add populate logic. We learned in previous section that we could do populate star, which is going to get all of the items at first level deep. So if I click on it, notice that we get our blocks, but we do not get our image. And you know that because if we take a look at our Strapi instance and we look at our hero block, we know that we're only populating with populate star first level deep, which is going to show the heading, the text, but it's not going to show the links or the image because those are our relationships. And so we're going to continue with the pattern where we're going to create the query first to populate this data. And then we're going to create a middleware for this route to populate it automatically like you did in the previous video. So let's go back to our trusty Strapi query builder. And this is going to be for our landing page. And I'm just going to go ahead and remove all this previous stuff. And now we're going to say populate. And we want to populate our blocks. In order to populate blocks, there's a special convention that we have to follow. So the secret to populating dynamic zones, we need to use the on fragment. So we know that our dynamic zone is called blocks because that's what we named it. So we're going to say blocks. And in order to populate our blocks, we need to use the on flag. And then we specify the name of the block we want to populate. For instance, if we take out our Strapi instant and our content type builder, the way you could get the name of the block that you want to populate is the name of the folder where it is and the name of the component. So here we're going to say blocks.hero. And now we're able to populate all the items within our hero section the same way we did in our previous examples. So let's take a look at our hero section component so we could talk through it. So heading and text, we know these are our top level fields. They're going to get populated automatic. So now we want to populate our link. So we're just going to say links, because that's what we called it, equals true. And finally, we want to populate our image. So we're going to say image, and we're going to just specify our two fields. So we're going to say fields, and it's going to be an array. And we're going to say alternative text and the URL. So now that we have this populate query, let's go ahead and test it. So I'm going to go ahead and copy. And back in our VS Code in Postman, we're going to replace this generic query and pass in our long query string. Now when I click send, notice that we populate our title, our description, but we're also populating our block, which has our heading, our text, our links, our primary button, our secondary button, and then we also have our image, which has the alternative text and the URL. We could also ask for more data, but I just want to keep this nice and simple. So now that we know our backend works and we're able to pass this query string to get our data, we could now follow that same pattern we did in the past where we generated a middleware to handle that. If we go into our Strapi backend under API, we did a similar pattern for the global endpoint where we create a middleware where we predefined our query, and then we set that query in our middleware to pre-populate our data. So we're going to follow that same approach. Just so you could see better, I'm going to do it in the terminal here. I'm going to stop my server and clear the screen. And in Strapi, again, we have this command called yarn strapi generate that will allow us to generate our middleware. We're going to go to middleware, click enter, and our middleware is going to be landing page populate. Let's click enter, and we want this on our existing endpoint. So let's click add middleware to an existing API, click enter, and we're going to use our landing page. This went ahead and created our middleware. But we want to make sure that we get the ID for this middleware. In order to do that, you run yarn strapi middlewares list. And it's going to print out a list of all of our middlewares. And boom, here we see our API landing page populate middleware. Go ahead and copy. And in our Strapi backend, we're going to navigate to our landing page. And the first thing we want to do is we want to identify the routes on which we want this middleware added. So we're going to click routes, landing page. And here, after the string, we're going to add an object. That object takes config attribute, which takes our method. We have find1, and so on. And on our find method, we're going to add middlewares, which takes an array, and we're going to paste in the middleware that we just created. So now that we have our middleware, let's update our middleware to use our query that we just created. So let's navigate to our middleware landing page populate. And here we're going to create a variable called populate. And this is going to take our populate object notation that we know works because we just tested. So go ahead and copy everything after this populate. And let's go ahead, paste it in. So now we have our populate with our populate logic. And finally, here on our CTX, we're going to say CTX dot query dot populate equals populate. So what we are doing is we are overriding our populate that could be passed from the front end, and we're replacing it with our populate that we're defining in our middleware. And again, like we mentioned in previous session, this improves security and also will automatically populate your data without you having to write the crazy query string notation from your front end. So now if we navigate back to our Postman instance, I no longer have to pass this crazy query string. So let's go ahead and delete it. And now when we hit send, we get error econ refused. And the reason this happens, it's because we just modified our middleware here that you see here. So we just have to go ahead, because notice our Strapi instance is not running, go ahead and restart it, and let's try it again. So now back in our Postman, second time is the charm, we click send, and notice we're not passing any params from the front end, but we're still able to get all of our data that we're requesting because we predefine our populate logic in our middleware, which happens in the backend of our application. And for the quick recap, we're now working on this landing page where people land on, which has a couple of elements, has our hero section, our heading, our card sections here, our text with image. And what we started to do is breaking down all of these elements into its own blocks. And we started by creating the hero section block. So when we look in our Strapi, we created a folder called blocks, and inside there, we created our hero component that we added to our landing page via dynamic zone. And before I go, let me show you what the complete section may look like so you kind of get an idea. So in our backend application, if we take a look at our content manager, this is the finished project that we're all working on building. If we take a look at the landing page, notice now we have all these different blocks. We have our hero section, heading section, card grid, content with image, markdown, person card, FAQs. As you could see here, we have 2 questions. And that is exactly what reflects here. We have a hero section heading, our cards, our section with image, and here we have our frequently asked questions that are coming from our Strapi instance. Here you see the data. So we'll continue building out these components in the following sections to finish up this landing page. And the last thing I want to show you how we're going to utilize this data on the front end. Even though we're not building the front end in this tutorial, that's going to be our next tutorial. After we finish our backend, I want to make sure that it's completed before moving on to the front end. But I'll just show you a quick example in code. And for this particular project, we're using Astro. We're going to take a look at our components, and you're going to see that we have our blocks. And notice how for every Strapi component, like we have a hero Astro component that will display our data from our hero component here in Strapi. And the way we're going to handle this in our front-end application and the way we do it in Astro is going to be very similar to the way we're going to do it in Next, but we're going to define all of our different components that our application can use in an object, and then we're going to map through our response, and then we're going to match which component are we getting from the response based on the name. So if we get the block hero component, this will go ahead and render our block hero component. Don't worry if this doesn't make sense. I just want to kind of add this just to get you start thinking about it. And we're, of course, going to build all of this in future videos. But for now, I want to make sure that we go ahead and finish our full Strapi application so you have a completed backend that you're able to consume with your front end. So with that being said, go take another break, and we'll be back here in the next video in a few minutes, and we're going to start building out our heading section here, and we'll also build out this card grid in one video. And that way, we'll just slowly keep moving through. After we finish our landing page, we're going to build dynamic pages. So you could see how we have this landing page, and notice how we have this about section here. If we go to about page, it is reusing that same component. So basically, everything we learned on our landing page is going to apply to our dynamic page. And after we've built this section, we'll have the last piece left, which is building our blog view and how do we represent our blog data in a single component. And after that, we'll pretty much be done. We're still a long way from home though, so take a little breather and I'll see you in the next section.